It's Jared from Strong Roots Farm. Today, we're not talking pigs, we're talking air compressors. So whether you have a farm or a homestead or just a shop at your house because you like to work on cars, you probably have a need for an air compressor. The need over time has gone down, so I'm going to tell you and show you some stuff today that is different than my grandfather and my father may have put an air compressor in. I'm going to show you some of the new technologies, way that I install it, and then we're going to talk about, is it really even worth it? That's all coming up today, so stick around. Welcome back. We're out in the shop. It's a little dark in here. I haven't got all my ceiling lights up yet, so we're gonna go through this. First, I'm just gonna go through and show you what my system is. And then as I go through, I'll talk to you about specific points, and then we'll go through and I'll show you what I would do and how I would do it. So I have an air compressor. This air compressor, I think this is a 50-gallon tank. It's no expensive one. It's just a Harbor Freight. It's a Campbell Housefield. I think they sold these at TSC for a while too. Cast iron, it's called the Farm Hand. It's a basic, your typical air compressor system. It's a single piston if you're talking about compressed air. And I'll talk to you about quality of air here in a little bit. But basically, it's in a room. This little closet was built before I got here, but this stairwell and all this plywood in this closet is all new. So this wasn't painted, it wasn't insulated, all that. And so we went ahead and took this and pulled it out. I had to completely redo this air compressor, change all the oil. It had like 4 or 5 inches of muck in the bottom. So we tore it apart, drained it, pressure washed the whole inside of the tank, put it all back together, and it works good now. One problem with having an air compressor in a shop that is not heated and cooled all the time, doesn't have a consistent temperature, as you may know, is buildup of condensation. So as the compressor runs and it pumps in warm air and it's cold in here, you'll get condensation, or the opposite. It's pulling in cold air and it gets warm in here with a stove, you'll get condensation buildup. And so that is the one thing that will destroy your tools over time, is condensation that gets into your tools. Part of my system design is put in for that specific reason, to remove condensation at each point. And I'll show you how to do that, how to help you with that. But that's the main reason it's like this, and I'm gonna go through that. So we'll start in the closet here. There's no light. I wish I had a light in here, but there's really no need for it. I like a closet because it takes a lot of the sound away. So if you've ever been in a shop and the air compressor runs, it's loud, right? My grandfather, on the other hand, had a shop that had a split wall. So it was 80 by 180, but he had an 80 by 100 shop and an 80 by 80 split wall where we just kept equipment when I was growing up. So a very big ag shop, right? The air compressor was in that other room in a little insulated booth like this. So this is his idea. I found it to be very useful. It does cut down on the sound. It does protect my air compressor. I keep a mouse trap in there. I've never had anything really get in here, but I spray foamed this room. So you can see the spray foam on the wall, in the cavities. So I even spray foamed all the cracks that you can see. So there's insulation board and then R13 in the walls. So very tight, very well insulated room, but my door is just plywood. It's not overly insulated. It does not have to be kept from freezing, this room. The other thing about this is the air compressor cannot compress air if it doesn't get air. So if you're gonna build a room like this, it needs to leak a little bit. You don't need to do it perfectly. So around my door, it leaks air, and it leaks enough air that the air compressor doesn't have any problems. If you're gonna build a tight room, you're gonna put in an exterior door with rubber gaskets and all those things, you'll need to connect an air pipeline to the outside or to another room or into the shop where it can suck air through a vent into that valve. So that's very important as you go to set up a room like this. As you put your air compressor together, like we've done here, we've come out of the side of the tank over here. This is all galvanized or brass fittings. It comes over, we have an air oil water separator, I guess they would call it, but basically it just takes the condensation out. It also acts as our pressure regulator, so you can adjust this up and down. to set your pressure through your lines at whatever you want. Before I went to this expensive tool, I did a T down. And so I don't know how good you can see it, but right here, there's a T that goes down. So as air comes through here, any moisture before it gets to this regulator has a chance to go down that pipe. So if this thing is spitting up water out of it, it's gonna catch it in that tube before it gets to there. Just so that I don't overwork that, it's just another way it can catch. Anytime I have a vertical line, so this vertical line here, I have a downspout T down so that as air goes up through here, moisture doesn't go as fast as the air. It'll actually get stuck to the line too if you're not using it full blast. And that moisture can roll down this line into that petcock, and I can go through and release it from time to time. The other thing I've done, I've kind of gone overkill on my valves. And so there's a main valve before my separator. I have a main valve on the main line that feeds the rest of the shop. I have valves, I have a petcock in here in case I wanted to hook a hose. This is the closest point to the exterior. So before I put all this other stuff together, I had just this portion together, and I wanted to be able to use the compressor before I got all my lines ran. So I put a hookup right here. I don't think you necessarily need it. It is nice to have if you want to blow this area out or blow your compressor off, but I don't think you necessarily need this one. So I come up and I tee in here to two things. This back line, which we'll look at, feeds the rest of my shop. This upper line goes to this hose reel right here. I really love hose reels, automatic hose reels. They save a lot of time. They save your hoses from getting stepped on because it's just so easy to roll them up. You tend not to walk on them. But the same thing, I came through the wall into a T here, and then there's a downspout. And then my air goes up before it goes to my reel. I also put a valve up here so I can shut just this reel off. If the reel is leaking, I can shut it off and work on just that reel. And there's a pressure gauge because I can't see the internal pressure gauge all the time when this door's shut. So I can see my pressure gauge to my reel at all times. I kind of like that effect. Now, as you may notice, there's several different types of material here. So we started with the fittings that I had in there, which were galvanized. There's some brass fittings. I even have some black iron in places. I used gas line valves. So valves that you find at Lowe's for a gas, like a natural gas system. I use those valves. And then I have my normal air compressor rubber hose. That's this gray hose that feeds my reel over into here. And then the main line that feeds the rest of my shop is PEX. So it's just like your water line PEX. See, the blue PEX line comes here out of the air compressor, comes down in through my shop, tees down to my first drop point. I'm going to use this chance to talk about PEX. I was very skeptical of PEX. Growing up, we used a Schedule 60 PVC, which was not OSHA certified, but it lasted 50 years. We never had it bust unless we hit it with a hammer or, you drop a tool against it or something and you hit it really hard. I think one time somebody shoved a cart really hard against the wall. It cracked it. There is dangers there of PVC splintering and air exploding out depending on your pressures. Most people's air compressor systems are set at like 90 to 100 PSI. I was skeptical of PEX though. Would it hold up? Would it work? And I've been in many private industrial settings. So guys who had manufacturing plant style plants, but they were private. They weren't a big traded company. And I saw PEX all over the place. And so I thought, well, can it really work? They've had it for years, never had any instances. PEX swells before it will explode. There's less chance of fragmentations of pipe. And so if you go into an old manufacturing plant or a very large corporation, you'll see black iron or natural gas line most of the time for air. But I think PEX is safer than PVC. Use your own judgment. I'm not telling you to use PEX. It's definitely not designed for this. And I'm not even sure it's rated for this because most of your water systems are 55 to 60 PSI. But I've never had any problem with it. If you're worried about PEX, you can buy rolls of the airline, like the rubber airline. I'll take you down here and show you. It is rated for 300 PSI. So this is Parker or Goodyear rubber line that I have. and it's a 300 PSI line. On my PEX, if you're not comfortable with PEX, you're not familiar with PEX and how to do it, and you don't have all the tools, you can use shark bites. I have a lot of shark bites here. I typically only use shark bites when I'm going from a copper or something of that nature, a steel, galvanized, whatever it would be, into a PEX. So in a housing project or anything, if I'm going from copper from the toilet down into PEX that I run the main house, I use a shark bite. But everywhere else, I use the crimp style fittings like you see up there. Okay, so it's a metal ring, they crimp down. I think this is called PEX A. I always get them PEX A and B confused, but so we tee in. So this is how my air comes in. At this station here, I come into a manifold with another gauge. I don't think you need it, but I had it, it was here. And I bought one of these spring airline hoses from Harbor Freight. And so got my vise here. It's a nice place to just put that and have some air tools to blow some stuff out. It's all right here. And of course, if I wanted to, pull it over and pump a tire up or hook another airline extension into that, I could, but this is mainly a setup to work right here at my workstation. And then the line extends down to the next manifold. So as the line comes down, it comes to a manifold here with another pressure gauge. This is not complete yet. So I do have a valve up here to shut this section off if I wanted to, but there will be another hose reel at this end of the shop, which is what is going to hook in to this manifold right here. We come out of this manifold, I believe these are aluminum, come down to just another hook point here. So I can just simply tap in if I want an extension hose, and you'll notice there is a drain at the very bottom for my moisture to come into. So everywhere that I go vertical, water, think about where water runs, it will naturally run down and I can drain it from that port. If I start getting water from that line, I'll drain that. And it will also, because the water will flow past this manifold before it goes into my reel, it's less chance that I'm gonna get moisture into my hose reel by having this downspout. All right, so let's talk some equipment first. The first one is the reel. You can see here, it is a central pneumatic reel. I think I got that at Harbor Freight. That's usually what they carry. I've had many of those central pneumatics. They've been good. I've had a Goodyear one. It was good. I don't trust Vevor 100% on everything, but I have seen people that use Vevor reels. They seem to be good. It's something that's going to be up for a while. Okay, so Harbor Freight is typically the cheaper of things, but the thing I like about the Harbor Freight is I have this membership. I go in there all the time, so I bought the membership savings, and I can take that back when it's busted, and they will replace it for me. Even if it's out of warranty, take it in and say, hey, I bought it here. I don't know when I bought it, but I've got a membership. Those guys there know me. I go in so much, and they just replace stuff for me. So even though it might not be the best name brand from Harbor Freight, I feel like I can get it replaced at any time if I had issues with it. But saying that, I've never had issues with the central pneumatic hose reels. Piece of hardware that you might not have seen a lot in an air system are these manifolds. And so these were here when I got here. I've never had these. I have seen them where I can purchase them. I've never used these in a setup before, but I kind of like them. You can come in with one line and it has multiple hookups. And so depending on the manifold that you buy, it could have ports off the side. So you can have multiple things hooked up. You can have an extra hookup here if you wanted. You can put a gauge in it. You can put a downspout in it. So those manifolds are nice to have. I don't think you need them. If I was to do this without a manifold, I would come down this line, I would tee over, and my air would be the one that would go over. So I would capture the air coming out the side, and the tee straight down would be my drain port. So it's harder for air to go uphill. So you could tee or do a 90 over and then tee and then go back up and come up with your air and down with your drain. I've seen guys do it that way. So essentially the air would come down a line, it would go over into a tee, and then it's hard for water to go uphill. So your air would go up and your water would go down. Now, if you're using something for an extended period of time, like an air grinder, it's constant air going to a grinder, that air could travel, or the water could travel through the air because it's pressurized. But if you're a guy who's using it and stops and using it and stops, you will see that water will go down a lot. And then every month or so, you need to go down and drain each of those ports, and that'll help keep air or water, I'm sorry, out of your air. You'll lower the moisture content. So is this worth it for you? I will tell you, I probably have $500, counting the reels and the manifolds and some of the stuff. If I had to do this in this shop like this, it would have cost me about $500. The reason I have galvanized and some black iron and some brass is because it is the fittings that were laying around. All of these manifolds were either here, and I've taken them all apart and put them back together. All those galvanized fittings, he had some on the tank, and there were some systems that he had put together. It was really cobbed together, but I took all those fittings apart. I cleaned all of the threads. I wire brushed the insides, and I'll go get a piece of pipe. I think I still have some of the pipe that I did not use, but to show you the buildup that happens inside galvanized with the calcium. But I did this with what I had. I had extra PEX laying around. I keep PEX fittings for when I'm doing plumbing in houses. So this was kind of thought out well, I think, for me, but I used what I had. And so I did this because it's what I had. So my recommendation is to use black iron. If you're gonna buy it new, use black iron at your tank. I do like PEX, but you have to decide if that's gonna be safe for you because it's not designed or made for an air system. If you use galvanized, see how good you can see that on film, you'll get this. And so this was at least 15 years. It's still got lots of airflow, but you'll get this calcium buildup. I especially saw it in fitting like the 90s and the T's where air had to turn around it and moisture would hold. There's those little lips on the insides for the 90s and things. There was a lot of corrosion. I had some that had, an 1/8 inch, maybe 3/16 buildup that I would wire brush them out. And so if you're using a galvanized or even just a plain steel fitting, over time, it will corrode. But at 3/4 inch, it'll take 30 or 40 years. I don't think if you're building a shop, you're really gonna have to worry about it. So you know why I did it? Because this is what I had. The compressor was here. I had an extra reel. I spent a little bit of money. I bought the reel, I bought a couple fittings, but other than that, it was all here. I just had to kind of put it together. Of course, use my PEX and all my hangers and all that. It did cost me some money, but it was here and it was very cheap because I had it. That's the reason I went this way. Well, what if you have nothing and you're starting over? Should I or do I recommend you do this? Well, first, I think you need to talk about or think about or write down what you're gonna use air for. And I'll just tell you, I use air like most everybody else to pump up tires. That is the number one thing I use air for, which is why I put a reel right by the door so I can pull that 75 foot out and pump up a trailer or a tire in a tractor or whatever it would be. That's the main thing I use air for, is pumping up tires. I use air to blow out stuff, filters, air filters when I'm changing oil, or several times a year, obviously. If we're bush hogging, I will pull the air filter out without changing it, just blow the air filters of my tractors out to have good maintenance. If you're working on something in your vise, it's nice to have air to clean up stuff like that. And I do have some air tools because I've had tools for many years. Since I was 10, I started collecting tools. And I had some air tools, so it's useful. But if you're starting from scratch, I'm not sure I would go this route. I did this little cost accounting a few years ago. And I went through with a brand new shop that I was setting up and thought, how much money is gonna cost? And if I had to buy the air compressor and all the reels and all the fittings and the PEX and everything and set it all up in that shop, which was a 35 by 60 shop that I had, and I was gonna have like 4 drops, 3 reels, it was gonna cost me roughly $1,600 just for the air, no tools, right? So that's a lot of money that you could spend on tools. For $1,600, you could essentially replace all of your air-powered tools with new battery-powered tools, which are much more versatile. If somebody breaks down the side of the road, you take a battery tool. You go out on the farm, you take a battery tool. They're much more versatile. But you do need air to pump tires. I just don't think you need this big of an air compressor. So if I was starting over, I probably would just use air tools or just use a small air compressor for my air tools and pumping up tires, maybe like a 20-gallon one on wheels. I would put maybe one hose reel in where I could plug that air compressor in just to kind of help me get it out there. But as long as it would keep up with pumping up tires, I would switch to battery powered tools. Now that being said, this is not a one size fits all. You have context, all these kind of things. For instance, if you're gonna paint like auto body, you need air. And I would recommend many more filters than I have. I would put one of those filters at every exit point if you're gonna paint. In fact, if you're really gonna paint an actual car, not just farm equipment or whatever, I would recommend a drying system. And so I grew up around a body shop. We had like a 7-stage air filter that was $1,000 just for the air filter we were painting fancy classic cars. So this doesn't really fit that model, right? If I'm telling you to switch to battery powered tools, if you're starting from scratch, if you're gonna paint cars, you have to have air. I would not go with a single stage air compressor, meaning one piston up and down that compresses air. I would go with a V pattern air compressor because they keep up much better. I would keep the air compressor in the building that had heat where I was painting cars. A room is still good, but if you put it into another building or a space in your building that wasn't heated, you're more likely to get moisture. So conditions and what you're doing plays a higher part when you're talking about auto body and painting and using air for that. But if you're just the average Joe or you have a farm or a homestead, you need an air compressor to pump up tires, but really a pancake little compressor that you use for roofing and things is just fine. It will take longer. You have to sit there sometimes. I have some tires on my farm that are 90 PSI. It takes me a long time to let that thing pump all the way up, pump the tire up. It doesn't have a lot of volume, so a bigger air compressor is nice. TSC, Roll King, all of these places, even Lowe's and Home Depot, sell air compressors on wheels, like 20, they might be 30 gallons. And you can roll those around. You can pick them up for a couple $100. Something small like that is gonna be all that you need to get started and to do most of your maintenance on a small farm today because of the technology of power tools. So I hope this video helps you, but I want you to understand an air compressor is very nice to have. I have a lot of air tools. Air tools are a little bit cheaper. So if you're a guy who says, I need lots of different things, grinders and cutting tools, they're loud, they're annoying to me, but there's a lot of cheap tools. You know, go into Harbor Freight and look at their air tools, grinders and cutters and all these things. It's nice to have, especially in a fab shop style setting. Air is nice to have, but because of technology, if you price this out, go through and say, okay, here are the tools that I have or I want, price it out, add $1,000 to put in an air system. Could you buy them all for battery powered, new battery powered tools versus buying air? And I think you'll find, like I did, that I could switch every air tool that I had to battery powered instead of using air. Flip side, I did it. So if you have access to a free air compressor or you have some materials left over from when you built your home or farmstead or whatever you built, you got rolls of PEX laying around, you got fittings, maybe you're a plumber and you have this kind of stuff. If you can do it cheap enough, air might be the way to go. It's all context. You have to cost it out and weigh it for yourself. One last trick, if you have air and you're in a cold climate where water lines freeze. So here at the farm, you've seen, if you've watched a lot of my videos, my water lines go out through my farm to all these automatic waters and spouts for the winter or for the whole year for water for the cattle. But in the winter, the cows aren't all the way out there. And so I have these water lines underground. In order to prevent them from freezing, I have a shutoff here at this shop that shuts the back side of my farm off, but it leaves one water hydrant here and one automatic water that does not freeze up here at the barn. And I made this quick little tool here. Actually, I just went to Amazon. I had seen something like these. So I have my quick coupler. You don't have to have this. This is a garden hose attachment, but my faucets have these quick couplers on them because I'm changing them so much, into this fitting that I bought on Amazon. I actually got this, I think it was in a camper. So if you talk about blowing out camper lines, they'll have this, and then I attached an air fitting to it. And what I'll do is I'll shut all the water off prior to the shop and open it up out there, and I'll open the furthest hydrant away open. So the water shut off, but I open it up and I hook my air compressor to this hydrant and blow air through the entire system. Blow all the water out of my hydrants, all, like there's 1,200 feet, 1,500 feet of water line out there. I blow all that water out and I go to each automatic water, plunge the air out, and I have this set on a pressure regulator, so I'll regulate my PSI up here down to 50, so it won't let air out when it's higher than 50 PSI. And I just go through and drain everything, and then I shut it off on the other side of my barn, and I turn the main water back on to my barn so that the hydrant and the automatic water has it, but it's with this nifty little thing right here. So an air compressor can be very helpful for blowing out water lines to prevent freezing in the winter if you set your water system up correctly. Well, there you have it. Hope this video helps. Appreciate you watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really does help our channel. Follow along for other things. This is predominantly a farm channel, but if you're looking at shops and air compressors today, thanks for watching this specific one. I do have some videos on costing other things like trucks and farm equipment and those things that people have been commenting and liking these videos. So if you want to see how we cost everything on our farm, check those videos out down in my feed. And until next time, have a good night.